All right, we are going to move back into open session, and the report out of closed session is that no action was taken. For the next item on our agenda this evening, welcome everyone, is communications. These are our meeting norms and our procedural guidelines. If anyone is not already familiar with them, I encourage you to take a look at them and make sure that you're familiar with them, so that everyone can participate who needs to. And then I will move on to our next agenda item, which is public comment on items not on the agenda. Can I see hands for anyone who would like to speak on an item not on the agenda this evening? All right, seeing no one, then I will close the public comment portion of our meeting and move on to our next item on the agenda, which is our school director's report.
All right, so the first thing I'll report is that today and tomorrow I'm attending the California Center. I don't remind me of the name. The California
Charter Center.
Charter Center.
Charter Center conference in San Francisco. So I'm just meeting up with charter leaders from all over the state and just hearing updates about what's going on in the world of charter schools. They have lots of breakout sessions tomorrow and all sorts of things like how to best serve English language learners and special education. So I'll be attending those tomorrow. The other thing to report is that we are at the end of our inquiry arcs in a few weeks for our second, third, and fourth, or for all of our classes. I'll let Chris kind of speak a little bit about that. And then today, I missed it. We had our school winter concert. I was hoping to have some video for you all. I'll send it around via email, but I have some grainy video shot by my wife.
Oh, mine's pretty grainy too.
Yeah, but from the photos and the videos I saw, it was really nice, and I've been spending a lot of time sitting in on some of the music classes during the school week, and it's incredible to hear what, in just a matter of months, what these kids can learn, and that one change that we made to our music program for the 4th and 5th grade classes, that there's kind of a rock band class, which is a little different than what we had last year, and just seeing some of the video of that part of the concert today was really cool.
Pretty cool. Did you want me to add on about the inquiry arc? So I think we talked last time about how the 4th and 5th grade are doing an immigration study, and so each class has come up with different questions that they're interested in finding out more about, and so now they're in that final phase of they've done research, they've investigated their question, and then they're preparing to present what they've learned. And that'll be on the 20th. We're doing an expo. And we talked a lot about whether we do it evening or during the day. Not all the kids can come in the evening, not all the parents can come during the day, and we sort of compromised on it, sort of an afternoon, end of the school day time. So hopefully we can get a good combination of kids and parents there.
And there have been some cool trips that some of the classes have taken. The 2nd and 3rd grade classes went to the Cal Academy and got to walk on the roof, which is a pretty cool experience, and do all sorts of neat things at Cal Academy.
Because they're studying
oceans.
Sea life, oceans, yeah.
And then the 4th and 5th grade classes, we had a class this past week go to Dominican and sit in on a college class where they're learning about immigration. So they got to go through that experience, which was really neat for our 4th and 5th graders. And there's another one.
We had done some other ones, but I think we had talked about it at the last meeting. So
yeah, there's another class that's going to missions, NFL. Lots of neat stuff happening.
Thank you. Okay, and I believe the enrollment information was in the board packet. Is there any comment on that? Okay, so we will move on. That was everything you had to do? We'll move on to our next agenda item, which is board and staff information and updates. Does any other staff or board members have any information to share? Okay, seeing no one, All right, I will move us on to our general items. The first item in the general items is a review and approve the draft audit for fiscal year 2017-18. And are you going to introduce that, or?
I think either you or
Okay.
John could do it. You talked it out.
Okay, yeah. So this is a very typical procedure for school districts to go through an annual audit where all of our procedures and paperwork is reviewed by an external auditor who takes a look at all of that to make sure that we are operating under accepted accounting procedures and that all of our paperwork is in order, and they report to our authorizer, and also the county gets that information. So we had our first audit for last school year, and we had a very good outcome, no findings, and I'm very proud of our staff and of Con for leading us through really good procedures and having that support of Ed Tech as our back office accounting system has really helped, because they have a lot of these procedures already in place for charter schools in particular, and have given us good recommendations on how to do things. So it's a very good audit report, and I don't know if anybody has any questions or want to contribute
Seems
anything.
like a pretty standard audit report. It's no material misstatements. They sample our accounting and provide a report that says as much. So it came out clean. Just shows you that all the hard work here that we did to be completely transparent is the case.
I was expecting findings in our first year. I've been audited many times in this world. I've never had an audit I'd say I've rarely had an audit with no findings. But I think the credit for that goes to Ed Tech. The money we're spending, really using their infrastructure to make sure that all our accounting procedures are done correctly. We have a payroll person dedicated to us. We have an accounts payable person who works with us, and we have an accountant who works with us. And they go through the close for us every month.
It's an extra level of review,
Right.
is what it is.
Right.
Yep.
Does anyone at the board level have any questions or comments? No? I'll go out for public comment. Oh, did you have a question, sir?
I had one.
Okay.
This is just a small thing, but it's page 6 of the audited financials. Just the office expenses number was so high. I was surprised by that. Total was $178,000. And I wondered if that included some of the office staff or something.
Oh, yeah,
that's primarily what most of it is.
That's staff. Okay, because I looked at it, I thought, how can we possibly have that much just like Xerox paper, right?
No. It's not what we categorize as office. They basically break everything into 2 categories: educational and non.
Yeah.
And that's what that number shows.
Got it.
Okay. Okay. Is there any public comment on it?
Yeah, it's kind of
Oh, sorry.
arbitrary how that line gets divided.
Yeah.
Is rent educational?
Right.
Is Luke's salary educational?
Right.
So it's somewhat of an arbitrary line. When we don't draw it, they drew it.
Ed Tech does, or the auditors?
The auditors.
Well, it's also funny to see staff people listed as office expenses. Like typically you would see staff in kind of like a human capital category.
Right.
Yeah.
The state education accounting system has this thing called function code. And it has, that's kind of the simplest breakdown between educational and then non-educational stuff. Like Elizabeth's salary is clearly by the salary, the ed tech expense, those are all non-educational.
Okay. Great. Okay. Shelley?
And a couple questions. Did you do a budget versus actual for a close of last year? I didn't see it in the, auditors don't typically do that, but sometimes you do a budget versus actual once the books are closed. That was one question that I had. I also noticed in some of the language there, they mentioned that they didn't do some things and you can't rely on this report. I don't have the language right in front of me, but I know there's different kinds of audits. There's one that just audit the numbers and there's audits that audit the practices. My understanding of it is that this audit was auditing the numbers, but not necessarily spot checking against, say, receipts and documentation. So I wanted to find out what kind of audit it was, whether it was just the numbers audit or a practices checking against like receipts and paperwork and documentation in your files. And then the third question was the page with the ADA totals was a annual ADA total of 135 and a P2 total of 128. Do those are those? They listed them there, but I didn't go back to see how they were, whether those were the same or different than what you had reported on other documents. So those were the three questions I had.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna get all the questions first, so then, and does anyone else have any other questions? No? Okay, so we'll close the public comment and bring it back up to the board level.
I'll answer those.
Okay,
So when we submitted and approved the unaudited actuals at the September meeting, that was in those materials, so you can go back and find it there.
September meeting, okay.
And yes, you know, as part of their standard audit, they have to do sampling. So they sampled invoices. And they do, I don't know all what they sampled, but they do sampling. They do it, there's a certain percentage they're required to do of sampling of paperwork.
Do you know what the language was? That there was sentences that said this cannot be used for blah 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 something or another.
Well, there's basically auditors, you know, auditor can expound on this, but auditors never put in an audit that there couldn't be something they didn't find. So the language is caveated.
So it was
But is it fair to say though it's, you have a standard opinion?
Yes.
So the kind of caveats that are in here are the standard caveats.
Standard, right.
Basically, they're disclaiming like there could be fraud, there could be other things, like, but that's a standard language, not
Right,
specific
Right,
to.
that's
this
all,
audit.
that language is in every audit you will ever see.
Yeah, I don't know the specific sentence you're talking about, but it sounds to me like there are language like that in the standard opinions.
Okay.
To auditors kind of protect themselves.
They're covering themselves.
Yeah.
And so they determine the best way to catch fraud and they do sampling. So all the numbers you see, they have a relative confidence that those numbers that we provided them are what they are based on their audit techniques, which is sampling mostly. So they go back and look at all the records.
in my experience with audits, most often is they say, give me a list of everything that they paid. They go through and they figure out which ones are the ones that are most likely to have an issue with them. Those are their sample ones that they pull out and take a look at.
They do a certain percentage of the largest ones, and then they do a certain percentage of random sampling, and then there's then they pick specific areas that they deem could have a higher risk of fraud, and then they look at those specifically.
Okay.
And then the
ADA, yes, those are the P2 and the actual annual ADA.
And in terms of receipts and documentation, Ed Tech has all of our receipts and documentation, so they had access to any of that if they wanted to.
They audit Ed Tech.
Yes. Okay, let's move, let's see, do I have a motion to approve acceptance of our draft audit?
Yeah, and there's, in addition to the audit, there's the governance communication, which is to you all, and then there's a letter attesting to a bunch of things, which either Sharon or John needs to sign, and I'll send back to them.
Yes.
So you're really approving all three of those.
Yeah.
I move to approve the audit results. I move to approve the governance. Is that what it was? The governance pages?
Governance communication.
Governance communications.
and the representation letter.
And I move to approve the representation letter.
Okay, so here a second?
I second those.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We'll move on to our next agenda item, which is to review our October financial statements and review and approve the first budget revision. Okay, and so we did put the budget narrative out as part of our board documents. Do you want to cover any key things that you wanted to?
I don't. I think the narrative is pretty self-explanatory. Kind of the major items were covered in the narrative, and then the budget comparison kind of touches on the smaller items, item by item.
Are there any questions or comments at the board level?
I think, the one significant thing is that our revenue is about $200,000 less than we projected, and we are in the process of seeking funding for that $200,000 from one or more people, and believe, like we did last year, that we're going to be able to do that.
I had a question about just federal school lunch funding. We've been trying now for 2 years in a row to be able to access this, and I was so disappointed to see that somehow now, so the deal is that Good Earth has dropped out of the federal school
Well,
lunch
they were
program.
never, they produced a menu for Quarter Madeira Larkspur that we would have piggybacked onto if we would have gotten it together.
But they backed out.
So we needed more kids, is that the idea?
Yeah, they're not gonna
Lots of
create a
kids.
separate lunch menu just for us. It's compliant. So I think the choices are, and this is something that schools gotta wrestle with. We either leave Good Earth and go to somebody like, who the district is now within, as is the Quarter Madeira Larkspur School District. I haven't asked them why they did it.
They dropped Good Earth? Is that what you're
They
saying?
dropped Good Earth,
Oh,
yes.
was it because of the school?
I do not know, I haven't talked to them, so I don't know the answer to the question of why. But, the fact is, they did. And so, I think for us to be the only customer of Good Earth, they're not interested in complying in the first place. And so, I think the school, community, and you all will have to decide,
Yeah.
probably in the next couple of months, whether or not,
I'm gonna bring it to our parents at our next community council meetings to talk about
What the costs
what the costs are, so they can be aware and just kind of hear their opinions and share that with you all. The other thing to note is we've done it and we haven't had to provide free and reduced price lunch for kids. We chose to do it because we felt it was the right thing to do. Now, there's a bill that was just passed requiring all charter schools to be part of the national, to offer free and reduced price lunch. And that goes into effect next year. So, and we're already doing it. I see the benefit of why that happened. But
why the law passed.
why the law passed.
Yeah.
So this is a bigger conversation.
There's a bigger conversation about that and compliance with that, and if the Good Earth food for next year is even going to be compliant with the requirements in that.
It won't be.
Yeah.
So can we talk about this school year? So we're already through this semester, almost. We've gotten 0 federal school lunch money for this fall, so that's lost. How long ago do we know this? What's the problem? And how much money is on the table for this? It looks like about 20,000 or maybe 22.
Yeah, 22.
Is that for the whole year?
Yes.
So there's no way, if we switched now, like what I'm wondering is, what if we switch by January 8th to the other provider? Could we get 10,000 of revenue or more? Is that doable?
I don't know.
That's being explored. And the other thing is with that comes a significant bump in compliance issues of having to pay somebody to work.
Yeah, there's
more hours.
additional expense, but there's also additional revenue,
Yeah.
which covers that expense.
Yeah.
In most likelihood.
Oh, do you mean we'd have to hire a new person to be standing there
Or add
serving school lunches or something?
Or add hours to Because it's not just the serving the school lunches, it's the compliance work on the other
The
end.
report.
Filling out
The paperwork.
afterwards.
Yeah.
Well, I'm frustrated that we're a year and a half in and we still haven't figured out how to get federal free and reduced lunch money. So I would like to have a decision moved forward that we could act on by January 8th, whether that's shifting to a new program or officially deciding that we're not going to and we're gonna eat the cost. But I think our budget is too tight to just say, oh, it's fine, let's just wave it off for another year. I just think it's silly to leave money like this on the table.
I agree with you.
So we
It's
will put
also
that in for January.
really quality lunch. It's so much better than any other school I've ever been at. And a lot of kids participate. A lot of kids buy it because it's good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you know.
and that's partially why we have to have the conversation with parents, is to say,
yeah, and
if
I don't know
we
if that can
increase
happen
the
before
price,
January.
you know.
To be honest, I mean, we don't have
But-
another community council meeting this
No.
month. I think it would have to be in January. I don't think we can do it. We can have levels.
But I think it'd be good just to keep this out as a conversation for our next board meeting too, just to follow progress on it.
Yeah.
But I
Do a
think-
quick
I think-
survey.
I think in the January community council, or I think that would make sense. I just think at this point we're not going to be able to make a decision in the next less than 2 weeks.
Okay, well, we definitely will bring it back on our January agenda and see what progress we can make on between now and then.
There's also item D on
Okay,
our board agenda tonight that is partly,
the wellness policy.
Mhm.
We can
It
have
does
that.
that.
Yeah.
I've
Okay,
got one other one.
uh-huh,
So the overpayment of rent that the district owes us, that's another, $13,000? Is that right? Something like that? And what are the prospects for getting that resolved? Is it just gonna drag
Well,
on?
I think they're good,
endlessly?
but they wanna wait until after the lawsuit's over.
Mhm.
I mean, the district has said, first they said, we won't talk to you, go talk to our lawyers. Then the second time I brought it up, which was August, the district said, we don't have time right now, after we close in September, we'll get to it, and if we owe you anything, we'll make good.
Did they write that on paper?
Yes, in an email. And then I brought it up again about a month ago and I got no response, so today I brought it up again. And I think, our FUA says, points out that this is an issue of contention and says and talked about the price as a tentative price. And that once the space issues are resolved, we would reconcile. So I believe, I can't say I'm confident, but I believe good faith is there, and there's no question, but that this $16,000 came from making clerical errors in several areas, and their documents make that clear. So I don't think there's much of a contention. It's just we haven't been able to sit down and talk. If we have to do it through our council, then we'll do that. But I think we know kind of what we owe them, and that's
Make sure we
it's in
don't
the-
overpay.
it's actually less than what's in the budget. That's a conservative.
okay. Any
I mean,
other,
there are little mistakes like the spreadsheet that was used to aggregate the total has Brookside Building 9 as zeros. But in the other materials they gave us, Brookside Building 9 has 7,500 square feet. So it was just people make mistakes. There were just like 5 of those. And the NPR, they charged us for they took the number from the wrong column and they're charging us for all the covered area, as well as the storage, which they didn't need to do.
yeah, so I think we've identified all the areas that need to be looked at, and it's a matter of just hopefully taking care of that as soon as we get this.
Today I delivered with the rent check for December, a very, very detailed list annotated with all of the supporting materials that this information comes from. The main thing they did is for White Hill, Brookside, and Ray Thomas, they left off either some or all of the buildings that were built in the 1995 bond, Measure A, because of the architecture drawings they used to calculate the space were actually created before, they were created for that bond measure before the buildings were built.
Luckily, we have a lot of knowledge about that time in the construction zone. Okay, any other questions or comments at the board level before I go out for public comment on this item? No? Okay. Is there any public comment on our October financial statements or our first budget revision? Just two people?
So I've looked over your cash flows and your budgets and have done some and have several things. And I guess I'll just start at the beginning. And I'm just going to talk to the board because you all are the fiduciary folks that are responsible for approving these. And there's some fairly significant differentials between your cash flows and your budget in the same document, your starting cash balances. And so I'll just go through some of these issues that I wanted to just bring to your attention before you approve this budget. So the first thing that I wanted to bring to your attention was that the November, your narrative doesn't say anything about the basis for the November starting beginning cash balance. Your current revised budget starting cash balance in November is $167,523. Your bank records at the end of September had $166,000 in the bank at the end of September. So you had $166,000 in the bank at the end of September. Your November starting cash balance in this is $167,000. So that's an increase of $1,000 in October, which is very anomalous because your cash flow says that you're negative cash flowing about $28,000 to $40,000 a month. So why October would all of a sudden positive cash flow by $1,000 doesn't make any sense. If you went by your October cash flow income and expenses, your original projection had a negative cash flow of $36,000. So if your bank account had $166,000, you deduct $36,000 plus say another $10,000 for your long-term payables, your new starting cash balance would be $118,000, not $167,000. So that's a pretty big discrepancy there, and I don't know what the basis for it because it wasn't addressed in the narrative. So I don't know, your year-to-date October financials was accumulative from July through October. It didn't call out October separately. So that's a big question.
Angela, I just want to remind you, your comments should be limited to 3 minutes, so.
I'm just you guys are the ones that have to approve this, so I'm just trying to provide you with some pretty major discrepancies here.
Get everything out there.
So the second big thing is that on both your original June and your December cash flow, your totals for your revenue and expenses on the cash flow don't match your totals on your budget. So you've got a total on your cash flow of a $1,817 blah 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 for the cash flow, but on your budget in the same document, your total revenue is $1,975,000. So you've got a $157,000 discrepancy between your cash flow revenue total and your budget total. Don't know why, but whenever I do financials, those two things have to match up. They don't, so I'm not sure what's going on there. Your expenses also don't match up, less of a differential. That was the same for December and January. You noted in your, you also have your state aid and your property tax projections don't match the schedules from the CDE or the Ross Valley the Ross Valley School District schedule. Significant is the March through June cash flow projections, especially the March. You have a cash flow projection of $103,000. Ross Valley School District actually has the March projection of 78, and then it goes down to 39, where yours goes up to 51. So I don't know why you're not using the Ross Valley School District's revenue projection in your cash flow projection. I'm getting there. I just think this,
Right, but I'm
They're
gonna
not
ask you to
anywhere.
wrap it up
So
now.
can
Okay.
we give her time then? Because I'm happy to cede my time. And
Yeah,
there are 10 of us here, so that's
Yeah.
30 minutes.
Well, you know what?
This helps all everybody. This is.
I would think this would help you as well.
Let her finish. I have answers for all these.
Thank you.
And then your beginning cash balance for July, you note in the overview there's a number of 134,000, which is said to be the ending 17-18 amount, and then you said the audited close was actually 146,000, but the 134,000 is actually your June, your 2018-19 close, not your 17-18 close. So if you look on your original June budget, under the 18-19 budget, the bottom line, ending fund balance is 134,000, but it's for the 18-19 school year, not the 17-18 school year as noted in the narrative. However, your cash flow starts at 167, not 167,000, not 134,000 as you have in your narrative here. So you've got basically 4 different numbers. You've got cash flow, June cash flow at 167,
Can I-
bank statements at 314.
Shelley, just one second.
Okay.
Let me make an observation, because
Sure.
all of these things have one thing in common. Well, not all of them, there's one that's different. We are on an accrual accounting basis, not a cash basis. So our beginning cash balance, the beginning cash balance is the cash balance. You know, you can look at our closing, our balance sheet for the end of October, and you can see where the $167,000 is. But that is really not the amount of cash we have in the bank, because we are on an accrual basis. So when we pay an invoice, that is deducted from cash on the balance sheet, but it is not deducted from the bank, because it's not deducted from the bank until the person we paid cashes the check. So most of your questions are operating under the assumption that we are strictly a cash-based accounting operation, and we are not. We're a modified accrual. So
That's not.
okay,
I'm looking at your bank recs for
October.
October say 167. Your bank account in September was 165. There's no explanation of what happened in October to get you from 165 to 167.
What is it? You go ahead and finish, and then I will respond, and we'll be done.
Okay. Did you have any other questions or comments on it?
No, I just think that just a general statement that said, oh, it's just cash accounting doesn't answer the specifics of the question.
I tried to answer the question. I tried to explain to you why the cash amount in the balance sheet does not match the bank statement. You have the ending bank statements for the last many months. If you had the balance sheet for those many months, those would not be the same numbers.
So just so I'm understanding, the balance sheet that you have says total bank account 167,523. You're saying that number is not actually what's in the bank.
Correct.
So I understand that you do a bank and then you have receivables and
Or
receivables and payables, and that changes it. But my understanding of balance sheets is that when you say you have 167 in the bank, no, you don't actually have 100. So when you list all of those
Can I
bank,
try just on that specific point? It's like timing differences. So if you ever days ago did a personal checkbook and you deduct that you wrote Aunt Lucy $1,000, then your checkbook would say 1,000 less.
payables and receivables.
Yeah, so there's timing differences. Bank statement balance, timing differences, and then balance sheet cash number.
Right.
So I was just trying to say a different way in case that,
No, I get that. And on your balance sheet, you've got bank statements, receivables, and payables, which is what you're saying. But you're saying that.
But the expenses are also deducted from that. So when you pay an expense,
So you're basically saying that you netted $1,000 positive in October somehow?
no, you're wanting me to do an apples and oranges. I'm saying that what's in the balance sheet has already subtracted what we've expensed, whether it's been the checks have been cashed or the bills have even been paid. If they haven't been paid, they'll show up in payables. But if the checks have been mailed, it's been expensed.
Right.
And
That's what's
and
left.
the cash doesn't, they reduce the cash when they write the check in the accounting system. And that's what the 167
The
is.
difference between the bank statement and the cash on the balance sheet is what a bank reconciliation is for. And that, the bank reconciliation handles those timing differences. So the cash on the balance sheet reflects our money that we know is ours. It takes into account money that will be cashed by people soon.
It takes into account all of your expenses up through that date, October.
Whatever
That
was
we
accrued.
paid. Right.
Yeah. So
Some of those expenses are in the income statement. That's what you would see.
for October.
That's what you'd see in the bank rec. You'd see all the uncashed checks.
All right, I'm gonna kind of wrap it up.
So let me respond to a couple of things you said. So that's the cash flow bank statements. Shelley, you are, the cash flow, the purpose of the cash flow is to make sure that we have enough money to pay our bills. But those numbers don't equal the revenue and expense in the income statements, which is when you say the budget, you said the budget has this much, but the cash flow has this much. The reason they're different, we've kind of been talking about a little bit, but the budget numbers are all accrued numbers, accrued revenue and accrued expense. So if we get an invoice and we book it, and we don't pay it, then that actually reduces cash, and so we can't. Those two things are very different things.
So your total budget for the year is different from your
Cash.
total cash flow
Yes.
ending total.
Yes, and the cash flow. So, for example, and this gets into, maybe this helps, the March issue. Why is there so much more revenue in March than the district thinks they're going to be paying us? The answer to that is all the money we get from July through February on this cash flow report. And all that money is based on our enrollment at P2. That enrollment was 123, as you pointed out earlier from the audit. The money we get in March, and the money we get through February is called advanced apportionment. In other words, they're giving us money based on last year in advance without really knowing whether we should get it or not, or how much you should get. But once we do, last Friday was P1, we'll do a whole set of reporting to the state and the district about our ADA, and our ADA is I don't remember where it is exactly, but it's around 153. So we're going to get revenue in March that's made up for, it's a makeup for all the money we didn't get in the first 7 months in the advanced apportionment. And the district will, if it does the right thing, it will adjust the numbers so that when we get to the end of the year, like we did last year, they don't have to catch up everything, because the state determines what it is they have to give us. they don't determine it. The numbers that they're giving us now that's in their sheets and that they're paying us is based on a made-up ADA number. I don't remember what it is, but it's a lot lower than 153. So that March bump represents the makeup, and then the following months, basically, they figure out how much we should have got, and then they subtract it from what we did get, and then, or how much we should get totally, and then they take. I think I don't remember exactly, but it's like one third comes in the first month, and then 1/6, 1/6, 1/6.
They make up the difference
They
over the
make up
next
the
3
difference
months.
over the next 3 months,
Okay.
and that's why those numbers are bigger than the. So that's all cash flow, but as a in the budget, we basically pretend like that money is all going to come to us this year. And so when we get to the end of the year and we get to July and we haven't received any money from the district, or the last payment from the district, which last year was a very large check, and we haven't received the last payment from the state, we accrue that. And so that shows up on our income, but not on our cash. And that's the trick of having the cash flow report, is actually figuring out how much is going to come and when it's going to come. And the beginning and ending balances, those you're talking about, reserves, the 146,000 that we ended with last year, which was bigger than we thought it was going to be, and which is in those September numbers. That is not cash, that is income. So that isn't how much we have in the bank, that's how much we have in our net worth of income minus expense accrued over that period. So I don't want to, so if you have more, I'll be happy to talk to you on the phone and go over all this with you. I don't want to take up the whole evening with this.
Yeah, I think we've made a good faith effort to try to answer, but I think my recommendation would be, if you have a lot of questions about something on the agenda, if you can try to communicate it to us beforehand, then we can either connect you with the right person to answer those questions, or maybe we can try to address them in the presentation when we're doing it, rather than trying to come up with a lot of information all at once in response to questions that we don't have time to prepare for. So let me just see if there's any other questions regarding the budget.
I have a general question. This will be the second year in a row that you will have sought out grants from external sources outside of our community in order to stay afloat. Your school was built so that this community, the idea is that this community supports it, and therefore that's how the school survives. That has not happened 2 years in a row. How many years are you going to continue seeking grants in order to keep a school viable that this community is not supporting? That's an external source that's continuing to play a part in our community.
Thank you. Any other ones before yeah.
Oh, I just have a question building on her question. What if you don't get that 200,000? Or do you already have the 200,000 in grants, or are you where are you in the application process? If that doesn't come through, what does that do to your budget?
Okay. Any other questions before I close the public comment? Okay, so I'm going to close public comment, and
I'll answer both those.
okay.
So the first one is school district collects about $2,000 per ADA from the parcel tax. If we receive $2,000 extra per ADA, that would be $320,000 a year. So the answer to your question is we intend to be sustainable, and we are going to be sustainable, and our ADA grew from 1 year to the next significantly, and we believe we're going to be able to continue that. In terms of The $200,000, as I said, I think at the beginning, we are actively pursuing it, and we believe we have great confidence that we will receive it.
And I'll speak to you may not want us, but there are families of 164 kids who are here that do want us and are here. And that number has grown from last year to this year. And as an addition to that, the district has been deficit spending for a while. And they have the capacity to that extent of reserve. As a new school, that's very difficult for us, like a new business. But like Con said, we have every intention of being sustainable.
And at the same time, we will try to pursue additional opportunities always to support our program. And so I think you should understand that out into future years, we're always going to be seeking other sources of monies that will help us to support our program and what we want to do on behalf of our students. And even though it was characterized as only outside money, there are many people locally who support our school and with monetary contributions, and we also seek them out. So
Just like many other nonprofit organizations in this community.
okay, so I will bring it up for a vote at the board level. Do I hear a recommendation for accepting our October financial statements and approving our first budget revision?
Move to approve the October financial statements and budget revision.
Okay, second?
I second it.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Our next agenda item is revise and approve joint Form J13A to receive ADA funding for the school closure on November 16th from poor air quality. And this is happening throughout the county and throughout the Bay Area that school districts submit these requests to receive the replacement ADA funding when we have to close down our schools due to conditions such as this one. So it's a pretty basic thing to do, and there's not a lot to say about it. I don't know if there's any questions at the board level. Are there any public comments on this item?
I'm going to pass around a sheet because I not only need your vote, but I need your signature.
Okay. So I will close public comment then, and we'll bring it back up to the board level. And I'd like to hear a motion for approval of this Form J13A.
I move that we approve Form J13A.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?